Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and I have a passion for empowering others to take responsibility for their careers. Yes, I've written several books on owning your career and am loving hosting this podcast. This podcast is for you if you're willing to make a shift to the driver's seat in your career. We feature leaders who inspire, empower, and motivate you for consistent career action for results. Please continue to join us every Sunday when a new episode is released. Let's get into this week's show. Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. Today, I'm excited to have with us on the show Byron Slosar, who is the founder of HelloHive, a career development and recruiting platform that connects students and entry-level candidates with companies that prioritize DEI. Ooh, audience, I love this. You know I do DEI work for a living, so I'm excited to talk to Byron today. But his work has a goal really to build a more inclusive entry-level workforce that will grow into senior roles. Byron Slosar. Byron, forgive me. I'm going to get better as we talk. Previously spent 15 years in career development and recruiting, working with thousands of students over his career. Byron, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to visit with you a little bit today.
Me too. You're talking my language when you talk about inclusion. I'm passionate about inclusive leadership. So tell me how you got interested in this space of really creating more inclusive opportunities for students and organizations.
I think it's the word of the day might be very unintentional until recently, but I spent about 15 years in a traditional career role that was complete entry by accident. And so everything that we do at the company and just in my life, I would like to be a person first. And so maybe 2 seconds on my background will help kind of understand how I've ended up here. But I am, part of the LGBT community. That is my identity. What powers me into my role into the workforce is that I am a gay Southern Jew that went to Catholic school my entire life. They grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that has 5 siblings, and I'm number 4 out of 6 in my family, and that's the worst positioning ever. But I ended up, go ahead.
You're number 4?
4 out of 6, lower middle. I mean, if that's not exciting, right? But I say that in the context of when I look at kind of what I do for a living, my career started because I think reverse professionalized a personal interest of wanting to have kids. The only thing that I've ever known in my lifetime is that I wanted to have kids. I didn't know that I could, right? I came out at 27. I met my husband in 2009 when marriage wasn't even legal. And so I kind of reverse engineered this thing where I got to work with thousands of college kids. And having no experience when I jumped in the space, I think has made it pretty relevant to how we can humanize, I think, traditionally pretty stale and archaic recruitment process and make it more about people meeting each other and getting to know each other as human beings. And that's kind of how we've ended up here. And so, lifetime of learnings helped me understand much later in life at 42 what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Let's rewind a little bit more. What did you want to be initially when you were growing up?
A dad.
Okay.
That's all I knew. I'm a sociology major running a tech company. There was not a lot of my college experience wasn't wonderful because I just wasn't comfortable with who I was. But also I just had no lens on what careers were. And so I focused on really what I knew. And I knew that I had an awesome family, an amazing father, and that's what I wanted to do. And that really has been a huge focus of mine, even in my current seat, and also, a huge pain point that I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, but that's what I grew up wanting to be.
I
and
love
that's now,
that.
by the way, so now I've got a 6-year-old and, I did the thing, but I was ironically as someone now in charge of what 30,000 plus student and recent grads careers, I wasn't interested in careers and I really didn't know what they were.
Mm, mm. I want to take that in because, sometimes there's psychological safety or concerns into stating your truth and like, no, but what else did you want to do, and so I want to just let that resonate. You wanted to be a dad and how powerful that is. So talk about navigating that. You talked about, did you say 15 years that you did work? Maybe talk about what that experience was like for you and navigating that with that in your mind. You wanted to be a dad. What was your experience navigating work for the first 15 years like?
Um, I mean, it was a job, not a career.
Mm-hmm.
It became a career when I realized we can do things differently and that the way people were doing the thing, if they only continued doing the thing the way that they've always done it, was really disadvantaging a lot of people across all different backgrounds and experiences.
Mm.
Uh, but, as I looked at this, my husband's a very successful real estate broker. Prior to COVID, if you would have said, where are you going to be in 5 years? I was going to be at home raising my son.
Mm.
Um, but I saw a moment in time that was interesting, and so now we're in a very different place. But it's been a lot of change, and I've learned that I answer questions very simply now. So I mean that it was not hard for me to answer. That's what I wanted to be, because I think one of my few organic qualities as a CEO, um, I'm massively self-aware.
Mm.
Um, and the first almost 30 years of my life was spent way too much about caring what people thought about me, that now I'd rather everything within 5 minutes and continue a conversation with me or dip out. But I don't
Mm.
want to waste time anymore. I don't want people to not know who I am.
Mm. I love that. So embracing your identity. So talk about how embracing your identity has served you in your career.
Um, I mean, I just learned how to do that.
Mm.
And so I think for a long time, when we think about like what prevented me from even knowing what careers were, I didn't have the mindset in college to think about anything other than what the hell am I going to do with my life, because I'm in Louisiana and I know that I'm gay, but I can't tell anybody that, right? I didn't have the space to open that conversation. By the time I got stuck in New York the weekend that Hurricane Katrina hit.
Mm.
I was 27 years old. I was still in the closet. Um, Only getting stuck in a city that I had never really experienced and seeing that there was a world outside of where I had been, did I know that there was a life outside of Louisiana, right? So I think, it was from a career lens, knowing who I am has helped me build this company. Um, Not knowing who I was, uh, helps me understand why we built this company.
Mm. Powerful, powerful. So let's jump right to it. What do you say is what are the key ingredients to successfully owning your career?
I don't know that I fully own my career just yet. But I
Okay.
think what I'm really good at um, is acknowledging that there are many different pathways to achieve success. This success can be defined very differently. But me as an entrepreneur, I didn't go to business school. I never studied finance. My way here was very different, and that a little bit abnormal. And so my perspective on it is a little bit different as well. Of when I look at just the success we're creating, the ability for me to own something, my career, my work-life balance, whatever it is, I'm still learning a lot.
Hmm.
And so I'm not the guy who wanted to do this their entire life, who has now found success and who is sitting, very confidently in the seat. I'm probably the opposite. I am a first-time CEO and founder. I'm doing my best, but I'm also very aware that like I'm probably not the best person to sit in this seat, but I'm good for now. And it's a lot to take in. So I think when I look at owning my career, it's also figuring out this work-life balance thing that is not a real thing. Or I haven't figured it out, but I think I'm going to own my career when I can figure that piece out of how can I be as present at work as I am at home or vice versa. And it's not like living, breathing anxiety of my life every day.
I completely understand. I have an 8-year-old, so I completely understand navigating the space as a CEO. And I've heard the term, not work-life balance, but work-life integration. That seems to be more applicable for me. So yeah, this show is about being in the driver's seat for your career, which is intentionality towards your career outcomes, and not sitting in the passenger seat and allowing other people to navigate your career. With those definitions in mind, can you share an experience of being in the passenger seat as well as being in the driver's seat for your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the driver's seat, I drive pretty well with intuition, right? So there are certain things that I am very good at. And I'll make it analogous to my son. My son, like, we were talking to his teachers, we were working on like him having the confidence in the classroom that he has on the playground, right? And so like he and I both, and while we also share a name, his name's Byron, the things that I'm really good at, I can drive without thinking. That also makes me a very uncomfortable passenger sometimes when I should be. I can, I process information very quickly. My experience in the space allows me to make very informed decisions that aren't always data driven, and it drives my head of marketing crazy. But it makes me a very difficult discerner, right? It makes me very impatient when I have to like over explain things or prove them when I just know they're right. But it's a healthy balance of like, I would say a lot of my success is actually being not a passive passenger, but an active observer to the point where I know that it's the right decision to make or the right direction to drive. And sometimes you can't always be behind the wheel to watch the side of the road, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I've had people tell me they're, outside pushing the car. So
Yeah.
we've had a variety of answers from guests. So thinking about what we've been talking about and your career body of work, what's a title that would encapsulate your lessons, your learnings, something that speaks to maybe some advice on your career?
Ask me the question again.
Yeah, I threw a lot in there. Yeah. Said another way, if you were to write a book and you gave the book title is based on your career body of work, what would the title be?
That is a phenomenal question. You don't have to know everything to be the best at something. And I say that applicable to my job as a CEO, but also to my job as a first-time dad. You can overknow something, which makes you, I think a little less impactful in how you do it.
Well, you don't know till you know, especially with the parenting. There's a whole lot to learn. So no matter what people tell you, it's not the same until you get into the role. That was my experience.
I'll take that advice from you when I've decided as a dad, as I will no longer take advice from people who don't have kids.
A lot of that too.
Yeah.
Even the people that have kids have a lot of advice that
I'll take it.
Yeah. You chart your own course. That's what I would say as a parent. You discover, explore, and discover and find your way.
You have to. It's like, it's necessary. It also opens up, like, I spent so much time prior to having Byron thinking I was so busy and so important. He is the only thing that matters.
Mm.
I
It's very
mean,
humbling.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I do love being a mom. Yes. Yes. Um, so let's talk about risk and some of the risks that you've taken in your career. Share some of your insights from, calculating risk or how you see risk, how important it is for navigating your career.
Yeah, I think that acknowledging risk is important. It's going to exist every day of your life. And if you try to um, avoid it and not just accept it as a living, breathing thing that is often going to create anxiety and chaos and turmoil. Uh, but I live in New York. Walking across the street is risky, right? I mean, so I think like it's just like there are lots of things like you and I talked before the show started. I am highly ADHD and OCD. That is not something that's something that's just part of my life, right? And it is my job to figure out how to make it a positive and powerful thing rather than be scared.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like with risk and anxiety, I kind of approach it that way too. Of right now, everything that I do is risky. I'm a hyper growth stage startup, right? I can make the wrong decision tomorrow about where we're spending or not hire the right person. Um, but it's just going to be a constant, ever flowing thing. Um, that if I'm aware of, I can uh, deal with it, but not push it aside.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How do you learn to deal with your uniqueness? You disclosed several things during the interview. And there are some listeners who struggle with whether it's being out, sexual orientation, or, navigating the workplace given identity, how to see it, how to frame it as a positive and to successfully show up and be parts of conversation or successfully advocate for yourself. How do you learn to appreciate your differences and be able to use that as a lever in navigating your career?
I mean, it took me a long time. I think when I look at whether it's who I am as a person or all of our students thinking about self-identity rather than checkboxes,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about sharing who we are rather than disclosing who we are, right? Like there's a lot of like I I think first about like why is it relevant and why is it important? Um, and then it's easier for me, I think, and back to kind of what I said earlier, I'm such a massively insecure person, and that's never going to change, ever. But I made a decision that because of that, I'm going to have everyone know exactly who I am and everything about me within the first 3 minutes of meeting me. Um, because like a bad GPA, I can't convince some of our clients that GPA doesn't matter,
Mm.
right? But what I do is I make sure that if there's a GPA requirement, that candidates that don't have that GPA can never apply because I don't want them wasting time.
Why is there a GPA? I digress. But
Oh,
d- like, what does that matter?
nothing. It does, but you know what? I depends. But I think that it's a thing that a lot of people pay attention to because people always have, right? But when I think about kind of the way that I introduced myself at the beginning of this, like I want to make sure that people see the value of my experience beyond my identity.
Mm-hmm.
And that just makes me feel a little less tokenized, right? It helps me understand where my value is, so that I can talk about the good stuff of why I matter to you, which for me is a massively insecure person who my love language is words of affirmation. If I can figure out why I'm relevant to you and why you appreciate me, that
Mm,
makes me feel really good.
mm, mm. Powerful. Yeah, I got caught up with that, it's kind of like have a degree to be an administrative assistant, some of the requirements out there. And then I hear GPA and I know people tout their 4.0 or whatever it is, but does that really apply when you start to do the work? I don't know.
No, for me, I mean, I'm not, you know, this isn't like self-deprecating. I'm traditionally not a very smart person academically. What did that do for me in college? I had to work so hard to have a good GPA that I missed out on everything.
Mm, mm,
But we're in a world where I think we are seeing a massive shift in not just like GPA requirements, but also whether or not formal education is something that is going to be required to be successful in a position,
mm-hmm.
right? And so I think we are seeing lots of growth in those kind of predefined areas. But I think, it's a good kind of comparison to how I look at you knowing everything else about me too.
Mm. A question for you. What resources have you found to be helpful in leveling up your skill set in your career?
My husband.
Yeah, say more.
I don't like to read. When I have free time, I like to watch really bad TV. And I've had to learn so much in this seat over the past 5 years that I honestly, and it might be the worst answer ever, and you'll wonder why you were interviewing me, but I don't want to learn anything new anymore, right? I'm exhausted. So when I need that perspective, I go to him, right? He is in a very different industry, but he has such good advice, and he knows me as a person, and he helps me. Like, there have been difficult times, there have been dark times in building any company, but that's all I need. And I think that's like, you can overdo something. I was finding myself exhausted, but I had wonderful mentors, still do, but there's so many of them. And like, I was just like, with my ADHD, I was like, what do I need? What do I need? Who can I ask? And it was just like, it was preventing me from actually doing the thing, which is being present at work. So now I just pivot to him, and he usually has a good answer for me. And most of the time, he's making some decisions that I should have made a long time ago. And then he reminds me that he was right the first time.
I don't know. I'm thinking your episode could be titled "Find Your One Person."
Well, for me, it's two. It's Matt and Byron. So find your two.
Find the two people. Okay, find your two. Awesome, awesome. Okay, so do you have any additional advice that you would share with our listeners in terms of being successful in navigating and owning your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that was a great question about the book earlier, but you don't need to know everything. You just need to know that it exists as a thing. I am so fulfilled now, and it's in a role that I never knew even existed 6 years ago. And so we get so focused. I know that you're a coach, on like, what's the 5-year plan? What's the 10-year plan? But you look at like just how the world is changing every year and a half right now. And why the hell would I build a 5-year plan when the world's going to change 13 times backwards in that 5 years? And so for me, what I tell my college kids, my early career job seekers, right? It's about step 2, not step 7. Right. So when I was young, there was this thing called a choose your own adventure book, which is how I live my life. You read through and you get to an inflection point. And at that inflection point, it says, if you want to see this character do this, go to page 17. If you want to see this character go do this, go to page 34. And you get to make that decision, but it's a very linear decision at that point in time. Book always ends up the same. Right? So with life, like we're all gonna end up in the same place. And so we can still get there by making some very unique and different decisions. But I think it's just a matter of taking it one step at a time.
I love that. Byron, it's been great to have you on the show. Can you tell our listeners how they can reach you if they'd like to do so?
Sure. Email byron@hellohive.com. LinkedIn is Byron Slosar. My Instagram is shockingly Byron_is_pop, because that's my dad name.
Oh, I love that. Byron, thanks so much for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was so nice to see you.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this week's empowering career story on the podcast. If you did, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Wherever you listen to the podcast, be sure that you are subscribing and that you rate and review the podcast. It's so important as we continue to spread the word of career empowerment. In addition, you can head over to the LinkedIn platform and join the Power of Owning Your Career discussion group. There you can have access to the guests who have been on the podcast, as well as others listening to the podcast, as well as myself, where we can continue the conversation. I hope to see you on that platform. You can also email me at pooyc@simonemorris.com if you have a suggestion for guest or a message that you want me to hear personally. Thanks so much, and make it an inspiring, empowering week in your career.